nah, 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 nah. Hey, don't be late to the party tonight.
Where at?
You know where it's at.
2025 was a bad year for Lil Nas X.
We're learning that rapper Lil Nas X has been arrested by police in L.A. early this morning. That's according to the L.A. County Sheriff inmate records.
His newest project was a commercial flop. He was hospitalized with partial face paralysis, and he had a very public meltdown in the middle of Los Angeles, resulting in an arrest for battery of a police officer. For somebody who was, only a few years back, one of the most promising artists on the scene, this was a devastating collapse.
First of all, as you can see, Montero is doing amazing. Doing great, and we're super happy for him, and we're just looking forward to a positive resolution in this case, which we're very confident of.
However, and worst of all, he became the subject of numerous SlopTubers, whose haphazardly assembled autopsies consigned him to has-been status at the retirement-ready age of 26, with fingers pointed towards a set of causes, most often being that he ran his shock value shtick into the ground, or that he took it too far.
The problem with Lil Nas is that we don't know whether he's being serious or not.
The problem with creators in this genre is that once there's some form of accepted narrative, any evidence to the contrary is often left disused. You don't want to be the contrarian when audiences are happy chowing down their daily slop and somebody else has done the thinking for you.
The truth is, though, this was a far cry from the hundreds and even billions of views he was used to.
However, I do. So I'm here not just to correct the record on a lot of basic facts, and to take the piss out of people who should care more about their videos, but also to present an alternative hypothesis, one that I hope will make a little more sense.
Since he first gained prominence, Lil Nas X has always been immersed in controversy.
Lil Nas X and controversy seem to go hand in hand in conversations about his influence as a musician. Much of this is because many of his major releases were swamped in some sort of discourse, meaning that commentators could build a narrative that can later justify the fall-off. But one of the issues with this point of view is that it isn't really supported by the actual nature of the initial controversies.
Well, although Old Town Road continued to dominate the charts back in 2019, like all of Lil Nas X's career, of course, this didn't come without controversy.
As many of you know by now, Lil Nas X's single, Old Town Road, grew its presence through a media-savvy campaign orchestrated by Montero himself. Eventually, it was picked up by the mainstream, with many audiences taking to its forward-thinking, country-infused trap sound. Country music and hip-hop had been flirting with each other in the decade before, but this felt like it was the first release to effortlessly fuse the two in a way that appealed to a wide audience.
Nas knew that he had a winner due to his knowledge of how the meme-infested world worked. I got the horses in the back. I was like, this is gonna be the highlight of the memes right here. He informed NPR. And then, the cowboy hat from Gucci, Wrangler on my booty. I was like, these are all quotable.
It was catchy, it was quotable, and in no time at all, it was everywhere. However, creators state it began to experience pushback from more traditional country voices, who felt it didn't respect the organic aspects of the genre it was inspired by. This forced Billboard into the debate, who ultimately sided with these more traditionalist voices in deeming it ineligible for their country chart. This is the controversy that many people reference when talking about the situation, particularly given the decision itself angered fans, musicians, and critics alike. This would only Streisand the song's presence, though, with a Billy Ray Cyrus remix propelling the tune to the top of the charts, where it would sit atop for a record-breaking total of 19 weeks. It goes without saying that the controversy paid off for him, but when viewed through a historical lens, could it even be considered that? I even saw creators confuse timelines to cater to this narrative of greater controversy.
Eventually it started going viral on TikTok, and then by March of the next year it popped up on the Billboard charts. And things started happening pretty fast for Lil Nas X. He signed a record deal, got a remix with Billy Ray Cyrus, and eventually he even went #1. But that's when Lil Nas X got into his first controversy, although it was not intentional.
No hate for Matty here, his video is tolerable. Yet, the song was not at the top of the charts when it was removed. The decision was not made on March 23rd, it was made before that, as the way that Billboard works is that the results for the week are released every Tuesday, so they would have needed to make this decision by the 19th. This was meant to be a technical decision that remained behind closed doors and was only unearthed by writers for Rolling Stone magazine, with public anger ensuing. If anything, most of the people who would complain about the song not being country were not even aware of its existence. Lil Nas X had engineered the song to be viral, but his methods of virality were not controversial. If anything, they were the same you'd see in America's funniest home videos, probably some of the most inoffensive content in history. The controversy was manufactured by a decision from an institution that, as far as we know, Montero had no influence over, and even without his controversy, who's to say the song wouldn't have performed well? It was rising on the charts each week and still seemed on track for a strong commercial performance. Billboard and Billy Ray Cyrus's intervention merely accelerated that. I say all this because part of the thesis that many creators set up in the history of Lil Nas X is the role that controversy has played throughout his career. But as many of them also acknowledge, the controversy of Old Town Road isn't over anything that the rapper actually did to promote his content, and therefore he couldn't have engineered it. This isn't even to mention the follow-up single, Panini, which attracted little to no controversy at all and still charted at number 5. A lot of creators seem to mention this fact, acknowledging its success, but also not contemplating why it was successful if controversy wasn't the explanation.
His follow-up to Old Town Road, the single Panini, was also very successful. It peaked at number 5 on the charts and earned Lil Nas X a Grammy nomination.
His 7 EP was positively received by the public, and the songs Rodeo and Panini were immediately deemed as his next hit songs.
There are countless examples of artists who had massive hits and were unable to follow them up. Even the person who tied Lil Nas X's record, Shaboozey, has yet to break the top 10 with any of his other songs. Panini has over 1 billion streams if you include the DaBaby remix, and is certified 7 times platinum by the Recording Industry Association of America, which is more than many songs that have topped the Billboard charts in past years. And the same as both Montero and Industry Baby. I think one of the greatest flaws in the commentary narrative is that they confuse controversy with virality.
Lil Nas X's early promise was undeniable, yet the very elements that launched him to stardom became the seeds of his eventual decline.
Commentary is prone to laziness when dealing with subjects that require more specific research and education. It's very easy to analyze a controversy on a social level because it requires less knowledge. Yet musical literacy is also very important when analyzing, surprise surprise, a musician. And even here, with the first couple songs of an individual's career, you're already observing patterns that point much more towards the merits of an artist's catalogue over its controversial element. Panini is often overlooked because it's not convenient for that storyline. So let's return to one of the key kernels of each of these videos, the release of Montero.
Lil Nas seemed more than happy to go directly at the people criticizing him, which not only made him more fans, but also made him more divisive. Instead of shying away from the controversy, Lil Nas X gleefully embraced it and forced fans to take a side. Either you were 100% with him or 100% against him.
Montero, Call Me By Your Name, was the lead single from Lil Nas X's first full-length album of the same name. It was released in 2021, a couple of years after his previous EP, 7. He'd been teasing this song and building anticipation for quite a while. However, whereas in the past he had to work to catch people's attention, this song garnered it from release, mainly due to its music video that depicted Lil Nas X sliding on a stripper's pole down to hell, providing the devil with a lap dance before breaking his neck, amongst many other biblical references that some would consider blasphemous. In the days after, Lil Nas X would also promote custom Nike sneakers with satanic imagery, though Nike did not approve of this.
Doa, my first thought this weekend was, wow, a Satan shoe, that is pretty bold even for Nike, but now the company's saying in a statement it had nothing to do with the shoes, and Nike's suing for copyright infringement. What else are we hearing from Nike today? What's going on here?
All of this provoked the usual slew of free speech warriors to emerge from the woodwork to clutch their pearls over the social decay that this represents, despite these kind of depictions being commonplace in music and media for decades now.
In this song, Lil Nas X clearly wanted to offend conservative Christian people, which would go down well with his own fans if he had hoped so, and by all accounts, he succeeded. This was what the conservative commentator Matt Walsh said.
See, this is different. This is totally unique because whereas normally these songs are vulgar and sexual, this one is more vulgar and more sexual. You see what he did there? He's a true pioneer, this guy.
Just because these people can talk does not mean that they should be listened to. But regardless, their words, with the power of hindsight, are heralded like a prophecy by select creators, who use them to fuel their own confirmation bias. My personal favourite is Loesta, who, as a video essayist whose primary focus is the music industries, cites DJ academics to try and drive home the point that Lil Nas X was playing with fire.
But while some hailed him as a genius, others predicted that these ploys had a ceiling on them, at times even making unfavorable comparisons to explain where they felt he was as an artist.
I've now realized that Lil Nas X is nothing more than a talented troll. He's talented at gaining attention and leveraging the fact that he's homosexual to heighten attention because we all care about the LGBTQ community. Lil Nas X will use and troll that attention and keep drumming it up to hopefully promote records. But I'm gonna be honest with you, Lil Nas X is nothing but a gay 6ix9ine.
Yes, you heard that correctly. Lil Nas X, a person who made a music video with controversial religious iconography, is the same as 6ix9ine, the violent, abusive, sexually deviant felon who has more arrests than he has tattoos.
If Max said he wanted to try fucking a dude, would you let him fuck you?
DJ Academic shouldn't be taken seriously for a number of reasons, but his inclusion here is particularly offensive. We're obviously allowed to show clips from creators we disagree with, but too often in this context, clips of creators are used to provide credibility to a point the creator's trying to make about their subject that they don't want to say themselves. In the Wasters context, he's saying that people were concerned that Lil Nas X was headed down a difficult path that will later be confirmed by his own failures. But the DJ Academics quote doesn't show concern or even a serious engagement with the conversation at hand. It's just an expression of ignorance that Loaster himself inherits when he integrates this quote as part of his own serious narrative. There is very little connection between pop stars provoking religious communities and any subsequent legal issues that they may encounter. But because commentators need this point to be relevant, they will stretch to give any factual points against him credence. This stretch extends to embarrassing levels.
The problem with this comment is that Old Town Road came up through TikTok, and kids were a cornerstone of his audience. Joyner Lucas would go on to make some interesting points on Twitter.
At some point in his career, Lil Nas X performed Old Town Road at an elementary school. Instead of seeing this as a genuinely heartwarming moment of charity from a man who doesn't have any obligation to do so, detractors weaponized this to show that he was some kind of children's entertainer. That Old Town Road was a kid's song, and that his turn in Montero was some form of indoctrination of the youth. Commentators also utilized this with the power of hindsight, including using a Joyner Lucas tweet, yet another appeal to some hip-hop authority. Again, if Joyner Lucas says it, it must be some form of valid criticism. If the man who called Chris Brown the closest thing we have to Michael Jackson said that Lil Nas X made children's music, then there must be some merit in it. Except there isn't. In Old Town Road, Lil Nas X brags about cheating on his girl, drinking lean, and states that his life is about bull riding and boobies. Billy Ray Cyrus mentions buying bras for his girl and compares himself to a cigarette mascot. It's not as explicit as Montero, but it's also definitely not a children's song. Children listen to all sorts of music. If you look back at what children probably listened to throughout the 2000s, music has become comparably tamer. But of course, cover your eyes, Lil Nas X is giving the devil a lap dance. I know commentators need to talk about something, but not all outrage actually serves any great purpose. It only does so if you are of the belief that Lil Nas X survived on controversy, which is probably the most demonstrably false point of them all.
There's no judgment here when it comes to what you prefer, but it's only to disguise the fact that since Old Town Road, I don't know a song, and you could show them all these other songs hitting charts, Spotify's listening crazy. I don't know another song. That's it. I think all it's doing is because he's not that talented.
It's an important point in the generic commentary narrative because they have to contrast the success with the subsequent flops that we'll be talking about imminently. Let's do what any of these creators could have done and do some research. We'll take 6ix9ine, a creator who would probably be the closest to the example of a person who survives on controversy, and actually analyze the success of his music on Spotify. None of them can brush Lil Nas X's most successful songs. In fact, one of them only surpasses Panini if you exclude the DaBaby remix. Montero currently sits at over 2 billion streams on Spotify. Its longevity is self-proven, and although the controversy may have helped proliferate the song's reach, with the label's enthusiastic support, this was going to be a hit one way or another.
Because of his reputation, Jack Harlow claimed he was advised not to work with Lil Nas X.
Reputation. Read that article in full, Louis Ister. and see what that word actually means in that context. I'll grant that Lil Nas X was a provocateur, but his knack for going viral only worked in conjunction with creating songs that were at least equally memorable. This fact can only be confirmed with other releases from the album that didn't attract anywhere near as much controversy, but still performed just as well. The one that some creators feel they have to acknowledge is Industry Baby, because of its large chart impact. And sometimes they stretch to contextualize its performance because it featured Lil Nas X dancing with naked men.
Despite no satanic imagery, Industry Baby's music video was still provocative, this time showing naked men dancing in the showers of a prison.
Even if this was controversial in an industry full of sexually proactive media and P. Diddy, where is the understanding of the music itself? And the role that the labels play in promoting it? Where's the mention of the nine writing credits, which includes Kanye West of all people?
Despite all these chart-topping hits and industry recognition, rap's biggest heavy hitters still didn't respect Lil Nas X enough to collaborate. Some critics even pointed out that all of Lil Nas X's wins were still based on internet antics and controversy, from Satan's Shoes to the sexually charged music video for Industry Baby.
Only a couple of these creators mention the third hit from his album, That's What I Want, a song that provoked very little ire from communities, while still racking up over 1 billion listens on Spotify and reaching the top 10 all over the world. Commentators might argue that, like you could with Panini, this was all residual hype and attention from people he had provoked, but that ignores the fact that Lil Nas X's second single from the album completely flopped, to the point where most people haven't even heard of it. It's certainly not really mentioned in any of these videos, because many creators wouldn't know how to actually work it into the portrait that they're presenting to their audience. That is, that in spite of the controversy and the attention he drew as an individual artist, the key to Lil Nas X's success was still his music.
He gave the devil a lap dance, slid down a stripper pole to hell. It was genius. Classic strategy called divide and conquer.
This isn't what divide and conquer means. He's not Genghis Khan. But I do think that there is a point to be made here if we tweak the angle slightly.
He pissed off conservative America, and he was embraced by progressive America. And he and Columbia Records, they just sit back and counted their money. This wasn't necessarily Lil Nas X's expressing his truth. This was designed to generate maximum engagement.
I think his content is reflective of some kind of personal truth, but it was also clear that he wanted to have a devout audience, something like Lady Gaga or Taylor Swift, the kind of individuals who can draw support no matter who they work with. The controversy wasn't just to piss people off and drive up attention, it was to have people who would attach themselves to him on the basis of that expression of identity, which was very distinct in the music industry at that time. However, the widely inconsistent performance of his music pointed towards the fact that he was much more associated with artists like Bruno Mars, Katy Perry, and probably the sharpest parallel to Montero, Miley Cyrus.
When you were, on stage with Robin Thicke and getting a lot of criticism for twerking at the VMAs.
All you have to say is 2013. I know where we're going.
Miley Cyrus has experienced very mixed levels of success from her musical releases, and her maturing from a teen pop idol to a more raunchy entertainer attracted its own degree of controversy, particularly during her bangers era. However, she was still able to chart her biggest career hit, Flowers, without any of that controversy at all. If people liked her music, they would buy it, but she never commanded the sort of fan base that would guarantee commercial success for her singles and albums. It's nothing personal, sometimes it's just aura. But often you have to sacrifice some of that creative freedom to retain a loyal following, something that many artists are not prepared to do. In Lil Nas X's cases, he thought he had a distinct persona. His songs all sounded so different to each other that actual fans who needed some form of consistency to latch onto were harder to come by. I think, as a creator, sometimes you owe it to your viewers to work harder to find connections within these subjects. Is there a point to be made in Lil Nas X's viral marketing and how that might interact with how his music sounds? For sure. He's spoken about that before, but the marketing is a secondary aspect that stands behind his music, and it wouldn't work if his music didn't have anything to actually make it exciting for audiences. And this is a particularly relevant point when we focus on what happened next.
In January of 2024, Lil Nas X put out his big comeback single, J Christ. But fans quickly noticed that Nas seemed to be repeating himself again.
At the start of 2024, Lil Nas X returned to the musical scene with the planned lead single from his next album. This song was called J Christ. It was officially released on January 12, 2024, alongside a music video which featured similar scenes to those shown in Montero. These included Lil Nas X portraying Jesus, being put up on the cross, beating the devil in a basketball game, while other biblical stories were referenced throughout the video. This was a very similar formula to the one employed by Montero, however, this time the song debuted at 69 in the charts, before completely falling off the following week. This was a sharp contrast to the performance of his previous lead single, eventually causing him to take a few more months to develop a direction for his upcoming album. What went wrong exactly? Well, our friends in the commentary community had more than a few explanations for why this happened.
This was clearly meant to be his next big single, his next Montero moment if you will, but it completely struck out compared to his other songs that had controversy centered around them, and even people who weren't Christian took offense to his depiction of himself up on the cross.
In Lil Nas X J Christ video, he was seen mocking the crucifixion of Jesus Christ and other biblical stories. He did this in such a trolling, distasteful way that it literally angered even those that didn't consider themselves Christians.
As the majority of fans criticized Lil Nas X for using religion for views and clickbait, such as this scene in the J Christ video where he crosses up the devil.
The problem with many of these hypotheses is that they're based on the idea that J Christ attracted enough attention to be even considered controversial. I'm sure you could find people seething online if you looked for it, but the amount of media attention this music video generated was minimal in comparison to what his previous work had. This might be partly due to the fact that he was retreading territory he had walked through before, but it's certainly not because it's more offensive than his previous content, and certainly not because he began to upset people outside of hardcore Christians. I personally think that giving the devil a lap dance is slightly more provocative than beating him at basketball.
But more importantly, Lil Nas X also offended the sizable number of Christians who enjoy his music and didn't have any issues with him. There are also people from other faiths who don't like seeing religion mocked as a whole, and maybe even secular people thought that he had gone too far and done too much.
Maybe there were a few people who were more offended this time than they were last time, but they definitely didn't represent the majority. And the evidence that YouTubers dredge up are often comments with a few likes. And Kai Cenat, whose bizarre outburst feels like a last-ditch effort to draw headlines and actually promote the song above anything else.
No! Oh my that! Yo, Lil Nas X, you could eat my whole... I hate that, bro. Nah, that shit just popped up in my head, bro. That nigga... Bro, nah, word of my mother, bro. God gonna handle you in the right way. I didn't even talk about that yet, bro. But look, God gonna handle you, bro. And you're... Bro,
what he did?
No, bro.
What he did?
No, bro.
Hey, yo.
He disrespect God himself. That's
Christianity?
crazy.
Like Christianity?
Yes, he disrespect the whole culture,
He was
bro.
mocking...
All of these observations overlook the song itself, which is still the key to its own success, and therefore failure. A couple YouTubers do take note of this, though don't tend to go into too much depth outside of showing clips of other people.
A big problem with this song was that he had drawn so much attention from the visuals and the spectacle surrounding the song, but didn't deliver the expectations that came with it.
We're gonna incite a reaction. I would expect the song to be a little less generic than this. And the biggest issue I got with the song, like sonically speaking, is how weak the hook is. Like, it's catchy, but the hook doesn't have like any weight to it. It just feels so light and like bare.
Unlike his other songs from previous albums that managed to occupy their own niche in the charts, this one drew immediate comparisons to a far more successful song by a far more distinguished artist. Humble by Kendrick Lamar, a song that in spite of its success was now nearly 7 years old, and whose imitators would immediately sound dated due to that comparison. I wouldn't go as far as to say that Lil Nas X is copying Lamar, but the sound certainly isn't original, and he definitely doesn't do enough with it. As a musician who needed bangers to keep himself afloat, this kind of sound wasn't enough. It's really that simple. And yet, watching these creators, you wouldn't get that impression. You'd assume that he just went too far and alienated his audience. But most of his audience were never there for the provocation anyway. They were just there for the music.
He would come out saying that, oh yeah, I'm in this Christian era. I'm in a new era, but this time, it's Christian. XXL wrote this. On Thursday, November 30th, Lil Nas X posted a preview of a new song on X, formerly known as Twitter, where he touches on Christian themes, praising the Holy Father. But Nas wouldn't just post this song and that was the end of it. This nigga would start talking crazy. He said, making Christian music does not mean I can't suck no more. The two are not mutually exclusive. I'm allowed to get on my knees for multiple pause. But That's the kind of time he was on.
Some creators even managed to confuse what J. Christ was meant to represent as a song. Some pointed towards his strange pivots to Christianity in the months before, despite it being written rather plainly.
Hinting that he himself is Christian now, finding God, and suggested that his previous Satan imagery was simply a stunt that the label pushed onto him. Nas also posted about going back to school to study the Bible, and even dressed up as Jesus, filming himself, of course, all to tease a new single. This one titled J. Christ. Instead, though, the tables had now turned, and Lil Nas X's plan totally backfired. Making Christian music does not mean I can't suck no more, he tweeted. The two are not mutually exclusive. I'm allowed to get on my knees for multiple reasons. Described by him as, quote, a tribute to the man with the greatest comeback of all time, Lil Nas X hoped to do something similar. But it was clearly off. Choosing this cover art showing him pinned on a cross, by poking fun at a religion that over 60% of Americans identify with, his error definitely showed, as J. Christ significantly underperformed on the charts.
J. Christ is not a Christian song. It's not an anti-Christian song. It's just a hype song. It's an I'm back song that happens to use the comparison that his own return is as monumental as Jesus' resurrection 3 days after the crucifixion. Genuinely, all you have to do is listen to the lyrics to find this out. Unfortunately, listeners did not agree, and with his new single flopping, Lil Nas X panicked and released a video addressing any backlash he'd received.
Hello everybody. I wanted to not necessarily apologize, but I wanted to explain like where my head at and where it's been for like the last week.
He also expressed vulnerability and insecurity over the response to the music video on a podcast.
Do they see this as that too? If they do, like, you know, that's really messed up, and it's, you know, it made me sad. And then, you know, on top of that, like seeing like actual fans like turn and say like, whoa, why is he doing this? Why does he keep messing with these people?
This played into the narrative that there was some larger backlash at hand, but if you actually look at the evidence and the reception from his audience, there appears to be clear support for the rapper, with the conversation being much more limited than it was following Montero. It wasn't that there was more hate, it was just that there was fewer sales to actually drown the hate out. The fact that he only addressed it after it stopped making him money is only evidence that he misunderstood his appeal as much as other people did.
But at the top of last year, 2024, Lil Nas definitely wanted to stoke his dimming fire once again.
1.4 million subscriber Jamari probably has the least educated take on this matter, confusing timelines and facts in a way that I didn't believe was possible.
But once again, Nas would come from this standpoint that everyone was taking him too seriously and that he really meant no harm.
But I also didn't mean to like mock. This wasn't like a fuck you to you people, fuck you to the Christians. Like, you know, it was not that. It was literally me saying, oh, I'm back like Jesus. Like, that was like the whole thing. I'm not the first person to dress up as Jesus. I'm not the first rapper. I'm not the first artist, and I won't be the last. And I know, like, given my history with, you know, the Call Me By Your Name video, anything that I do related to religion can be seen as like mockery. That just was not the case with this.
But this time, people were not defending him the way they were before, and in turn, he would actually double down, once again cosplaying as Jesus, and this time mocking the eating of the holy bread and the drinking of wine, which in the Catholic community represents the blood and body of Christ, something obviously not taken lightly by those who believe.
And I will say though, with the communion video, with me eating the crackers and juice, I thought that video was gonna be the video to lighten the mood, to take it down like less serious or whatnot. I thought that was something that we all wanted to do as kids or whatnot, but I didn't understand, you know, the reality of what it is. You know, it's me eating the communion, which is like the symbolism of like Jesus's blood and bones or something like that. I don't remember completely, but I do apologize for that. I will say I am sorry for that.
I'm not really sure how Jamari managed to create this timeline, but Lil Nas X did not double down after apologizing. The video in reference here was actually a promotional video that was released before J. Christ was available to the public. You can quite clearly see that by just checking the dates. Not to mention the fact that the video where Lil Nas X addresses his music video and the promotional video is the exact same one. even if you only knew this timeline from Jamari's video, you could see that these two clips have the same background and Lil Nas X is dressed identically, meaning that Jamari is implying that he recorded his original response video, then changed into his Jesus costume to mock Christians again, before changing back into the same clothes to address those comments.
So by this point, Nas had pissed off both the Christians and the Catholics.
Oh my god, does this guy think before he opens his mouth?
I feel like it's kind of the same vibes of what happened with that movie Snow White recently.
Look, I'm really trying not to hate on any one singular YouTuber, because it's clear that most of these comments are sourced from each other. But these are the very basic details that anyone can understand from a couple of minutes of research. If you want to acknowledge anyone who was upset by his persistent comparisons to Christ, you also have to take note of all the people who told him he was overreacting to his own failure. Lil Nas X may have seemed like he was trying to give people answers, but in reality, he was just searching for his own.
That message like turned around and I didn't know how to like do anything with it. It wasn't my chaos anymore. It was the world's, and anything anybody said was true because that's who I am as a person. I'm this troll and I want to make these people mad. And so everybody can run with that. And there's nothing I can do about that. I can say as many things as I want, but knowing my history, they look right, I look wrong.
J. Christ wasn't that controversial. It was just devoid of new or original ideas, which Lil Nas X had thrived on in the past. With that failure staring himself down, he tried to compensate by addressing anyone who may have been offended by his antics. But if these were people pivotal to his success, then his attempts to reach out to them may have made a difference. Which, as we know by now, it did not.
He then decided to release new music without any controversy, and Poetic Flacco broke down the gulf in popularity between his old songs and his new songs.
Lil Nas X was doing 1 billion views. Lil Nas X was doing hundreds of millions of views, bruh. And even at his absolute throwaways was doing like 25 million, 10 million, 20 million, all right? But all the new songs that Lil Nas X have tried to drop after his hiatus, 150,000, 150,000. And I'll be real, this looked like it's botted, because ain't no way you drop 2 songs and they both do identical views, right? So it looks like 95,000, 100,000 are his real numbers.
The problem with commentary on celebrity subjects is that people are often drawn to attention and conflict. Therefore, when something happens which draws little to no response or reaction, it's often ignored and then dismissed. Every subject is waiting for its Reddit discourse, or YouTuber to quote to make it relevant. But sometimes, irrelevance is relevant. If you don't care, this'll show. Channel RRG, which sounds a little too AI for my taste, seemed to not realize that he even released new music, jumping forward to the main controversy and then making this remark.
Perhaps the music will have to wait.
In the world of commercial media, these details aren't just important, they're necessary. They're necessary to understand the direction of an artist and the industry they operate in. If a musician who less than a few years ago was one of the most streamed artists in recent history suddenly releases new singles that receive next to no interest from listeners, then that is significant. This would be like one of YouTube's largest creators releasing a video that only gets a few thousand views.
Lil Nas X continued to roll out his new album, but his latest singles performed even worse than J. Christ.
It wasn't like Lil Nas X was throwing the kitchen sink at his music. In November, he returned with an announcement for the new album, Dreamboy, and official release for Light Again, a song that featured 12 writing and 5 production credits, including Thomas Bangalter of Daft Punk. This was originally posted on SoundCloud in March, with Lil Nas X apologizing to Columbia. Regardless, it was clear that he still thought it could be a hit. You don't draft these kind of names unless you're banking on the music performing well. But it didn't. And throughout the year, reports have begun to indicate that there was friction between the rapper and those around him, with a supposed insider alleging that his album had been scrapped at the behest of label executives. It was quite clear that this string of commercial failures was not just due to creative issues, but also to mismanagement in trying to forge a new direction for the failing rapper. A few months would pass before he would return with a new aesthetic for Dreamboy. This was notably different to the look he was promoting for Light Again, likely a last-ditch effort to turn his fortunes around, with interviews promoting a new, fun side of Lil Nas X.
But still months later, he stood by his decision.
You know, bleep it out, but my haters. I'm gonna have fun. I'm gonna do me. I'm gonna go outside. I deserve to be out here. I deserve the right to exist. Connected with something higher, and I felt like I was just having fun, and I want to get back to that, and not just like, oh, I'm gonna teach my haters a lesson.
The interview that Jamari is describing is not one that happened a few months after the failure of J. Christ. This interview was carried out on the red carpet of the GLAAD Awards at the end of March 2025, over a year after J. Christ. The clips do not show him doubling down on his previous antics. It's actually him talking about changing his angle and not focusing on the haters, more just about trying to have fun with the music he's making. This clip is a truly excellent example of confirmation bias, even in the face of a clip that directly contradicts what's being said. Lil Nas X needs to be portrayed as antagonistic to any criticism, because ultimately, it's that antagonistic personality that will inevitably become his downfall in the narrative. But as we've seen, at the slightest hint of any actual criticism, he completely buckles. This is not an aggressive guy. This is just a guy who's trying to find the best way to advance his career. This is a person racked by self-doubt, and any nature to double down in the past is likely part of his own insecurities. If you want an actual example of him defending his past lyrics, you could listen to some of his music.
But while he used to look confident in everything he was putting out, Lil Nas admitted he was at a crossroads musically.
You've been so focused and zoned in on what you're doing, and you push your art out into the world, and it's kind of received negatively by the majority, you know what I mean?
These last few years were pretty difficult for me. They have been pretty difficult for me, and I'm just now arriving to this place of feeling confidence in myself and what I'm doing, and I'm trying to make sure I put intention towards my music and my vision and the creativity of it all.
Where criticism used to roll off his back, the backlash he's experienced in recent years has clearly infiltrated his mind.
There's this narrative that he lost confidence following the failure of J. Christ, and although I think it would be natural to do so, it's very clear that this is a guy who has spent his life second-guessing himself, being an outsider in the genre he loved. His only way to cover for that in the past was his success, and now that that was gone, his insecurities were laid bare, and that would only continue with Dreamboy.
This was released at the tail end of March, and it basically has created zero buzz online, with most of the songs besides the single Hotbox getting less than a couple 100,000 views in the first 2 months.
Does Jamari know how much a couple 100,000 is?
Months after he announced his so-called Dreamboy era, Lil Nas X made another play at getting fans' attention by promising to drop a new single every single day.
Creators who released their videos after the Days Before Dreamboy EP didn't really have too much to say, but most of them had similar explanations for why it had failed.
So in 2025, the kids who listen to Old Town Road have long since moved on. The Christian and religious people who were offended by Montero also moved on. The Christian people who gave him a second chance after Montero and saw J. Christ were also finding music elsewhere, and it looks as if even the people who enjoyed his trolling had moved on to the next fad too.
And although he has continued to try and promote these songs the same way he always has by posting clips all over social media, as we can see and as the numbers clearly show, people simply aren't as interested anymore.
It's like he's trying his old antics, but they're not working.
Again, even ignoring the point of music literacy, it's astonishing that not a single creator has mentioned the environment for pop rap in 2025. That being one that was practically non-existent.
Let's get into it right now. New single, Still Bad.
Still Bad, which one are you playing?
Lil Nas X wasn't the only rapper who struggled to make a return. Lizzo, Jack Harlow, Doja Cat, Glorilla all struggled to follow up on previous chart success in 2025. Probably the most successful was the ever-present commercial giant Drake, but his beef with Kendrick Lamar the year before also likely dealt the genre serious damage to its cultural credibility. Hell, there was a week in 2025 where there were no rap songs in the US top 40 for the first time in 35 years. This wasn't just a Lil Nas X thing. This was something the whole genre was feeling. Now, this doesn't mean that Days Before Dreamboy was his best effort. Most of the songs sound at least a little derivative, and the main single Hotbox sounded like a 2000s throwback mashup between Hot in Her and Rock Your Body, both produced by the Neptunes. Now, throwbacks can often work in pop music, but for an artist who was often about making the sound of the future, this pivot to the past seemed indicative of the greater identity crisis he was currently encountering. This was a person who measured his success by the attention that he garnered, but like many of the creators who have spoken about him, Montero seemed to conflate attention with sales, and therefore, when none of these songs took off, he became a victim of this narrative, exhibiting a series of bizarre behavior on camera before being arrested and charged for battery of a police officer.
Either way, it appears that Lil Nas X is facing the consequences of his past actions, and all of the mocking of God and Satan worship he's been doing is turning around to bite him in his tidy whities.
I've seen some crazy theories about what this represented, from God taking his retribution to an unsanctioned form of promotion for his work. But if anything, this is just a person who was at one point hyped up to be one of the biggest things in recent musical history, very possibly manipulated, dealing with the emotional weight of all those expectations amounting to very little, and those dreams capitulating around him. He has all the resources he could need to manufacture this success now, more than he ever did when he released Old Town Road, but he simply can't.
Clearly, like many other artists in Hollywood, they did something to this man. It's clear they used Lil Nas X for years to push their agenda. Hollywood itself is anti-Christian, and they use this kid to push their anti-God propaganda to the world.
I feel like anyone implying that this is some form of punishment by the big guy upstairs because Lil Nas X blasphemed him has a seriously perverted understanding of what God is meant to represent. If anyone thinks God would be petty enough to strip Lil Nas X naked and make him march through the street in a haze, he probably has a lot else to answer for as well. I've tried to avoid the extreme LA satanic cabal narrative, just because of how far removed from any actual evidence it is. However, I am going to stop for a moment just to state that this is a person who's grown up around the church. If he finds Jesus, he'll do it in his own time, likely as removed from LA as he is from online Christian concern trolls, who are using his demise to line their own pockets while claiming a W for Yahweh. Throughout 2025, many creators have gone out of their way to emphasize how his career is now over. Obviously, this is clickbait, like the title of this video, but it's still given a sincere argument for why this is the case by many voices in the community.
Within an instant, people had enough of the same old scheme, and now he's trying to prove to them once more that he has something else to offer. But unless something big changes, he's gonna be stuck with people asking where it all went wrong.
Except Jay Diggs, who seems to be having the most fun out of everyone as well.
Most people covering the Lil Nas X situation right now, they're saying he's ruining his career or he's having his downfall. They got it all wrong. See, he's the one pulling the strings, at least for now.
With his trial in April 2026, Lil Nas X faced the consequences for his actions. Probably less so than the average person due to his standing in society, with the assurance that his charges would be dropped if he completed a recovery program. Yet, even if they do throw the book at him, he has the resources to leverage those struggles to his advantage. He has the knowledge and background in social media to turn it into something with value. Other celebrities have certainly come back from a lot worse. If SlopTubers were a thing during Robert Downey Jr.'s legal issues, they'd all be making videos saying the exact same thing.
Now, if you ask me, this is all promotion for his upcoming album, Dreamboy. But what do I know?
For a figure as public as Lil Nas X, it's never really over, and whether he decides in the future to milk more controversy or just try and make some music that's meaningful to him, he'll probably find a way to land on his feet. He just needs to believe that himself. Look, this is a video criticizing individual YouTubers, as much as it's a video criticizing the culture around the content itself. It is genuinely insane that so many of these videos talk about a musician without actually talking about the music. I'm not a musician, I'm not a music critic, and hell, I'm not even a rap fan. But most of this information could be found in an hour's research at most. Less, probably a lot less. The most time-consuming part of this video was having to watch all of those commentary YouTubers stretch to explain what went wrong with Lil Nas X's career. Interestingly, most of the conclusions were the same, the result of using the same information and omitting the same information.
Lil Nas X's rapid rise and downfall seems to be a pattern with viral stars who aren't able to match the excitement of when they first became popular.
His rise was meteoric, but his decline has been painful to witness. It is a reminder that fame built on spectacle requires constant escalation, and eventually there is nowhere left to go.
When you build your entire career on shock value, it can only last for so long. Back when Montero first dropped, people were stunned. But as time went on and he basically tried those same stunts over and over again, coming back dressed as Jesus just felt too try-hard, and a desperate attempt for attention. It may have worked better if the music was incredible, but when his latest songs don't stand out, the controversy becomes the only thing people remember.
Lil Nas X isn't a person who is too controversial for his own good. His provocations were mild at best. The controversy around Old Town Road wasn't even on his end and couldn't have been controlled by him. And I go as far as to say that most of his singles that did well were not embroiled in controversy. And even if they were, they didn't necessarily benefit from it. They did numbers on the basis of their own musical merit, and a culture that welcomed that kind of sound. A sound that, by 2025, didn't really seem to be present. The one point that I'd probably say people got right is that J. Christ likely failed because much of it felt like a rehashed attempt to follow up on his previous success. But I'd also add that, outside of a few select influences, it didn't really work in provoking a reaction. If anything, its failure was rooted in Lil Nas X's own challenges in understanding his appeal. Whereas Montero's a good song about lustful romance and Industry Baby about overcoming the odds, sentiments that are relatable to a wider audience, J. Christ doesn't really have a theme. It's just about Lil Nas X. It was a test of his star power. But, as I've stated, I don't think Lil Nas X really existed in the realm of those kind of stars. Certainly not to the point where he could release a song like J. Christ. By the time he might have been able to issue a course correction, audiences had moved on, and there just wasn't the space for him that there once was in 2021, or even 2018. Does this mean that his career's over though? No. A criminal record doesn't stop Chris Brown from continuing to chart hits, nor did it interfere with Morgan Wallen's chart dominance. Music fans can look past a lot if they like your music. And if, at the age of 26, Lil Nas X wants a route back to the top of the charts, he'll just have to work a bit harder on what his future sound may look like, and how he can work his way back into the industry's good graces.
Whatever the future holds, let's hope that the real Lil Nas X comes out of this loop of just troll baiting and promotion and can just consistently release music and find the authentic audience that he had hoped to put together, because he's just lost audience after audience and there aren't many people left.
If you are a SlopTuber, or even just your bog standard YouTuber who happened to make a video on Lil Nas X that was included in this upload, I'm not saying you can't have differing opinions. I'm saying that the least you can do is have original opinions, particularly while backing them up with evidence that exists outside of other people's YouTube videos. This isn't to say that these videos were completely lacking in original ideas. In fact, nearly every video mentions something interesting or original, like Raplaw mentioning his borrowing of an album cover, Hello Yassine mentioning other rappers who've compared themselves to Jesus throughout their work, or even Jamari for being one of the few people to note releases like That's What I Want. Yet, all these points mostly seem tangential when they come back to a conclusion that doesn't feel like they actually interact with the points that they've been making. I feel like a lot of the people who talk about these artists, even the ones who claim to be interested in the music industry, have completely ignored vital aspects of the conversation because it requires educating yourself in a way that is outside of many people's comfort zones. These rise and fall YouTubers have turned to what they know best, a creator's controversy, and how that can lead to one's downfall. But unfortunately, you have to work harder than that to link controversy and downfall, especially when the link is not a simple and direct interaction, like it is with problematic content creators. Celebrities and influencers are similar, but they're not one and the same, and part of that is how the audience will interact with the art that a person creates. When it comes to music and many other mediums, there is more separation, and an audience doesn't feel like they need to know a celebrity, especially in the same way that they might know a YouTuber to actually be invested in the content they create. We've seen flimsier evidence throughout the video, but even a YouTuber crashing out on a musician, or a comment with 20 likes, is less important when it comes to an actual musical artist than it is to a creator. However, even beyond that, the omission of details that would counter the usual portrayal of an artist's struggles fails to do this subject the justice that he deserves. There is no irrelevant song in an artist's discography. I don't expect every single release to be described in depth. I haven't even done that. But I think when it plays a purpose that ultimately shows that Lil Nas X was capable of finding success without controversy, as much as he was capable of finding failure with it, then it's information that's at least worthy of acknowledgement. You also have to consider all the very reasonable evidence that points to other operators operators interfering with his career trajectory. They could all be used to paint a very different picture to the one we've seen today. Whether you like him or not, we all owe it to ourselves to be factually accurate on Lil Nas X's story, and it feels like too often the only purpose for many of these omissions is to serve an opinion that was adopted before any research was actually carried out. It's genuinely easier to wonder what was actually created first, the title or the video. Why have two creators mentioned The Boy Who Cried Wolf while completely failing to elaborate on any of the other parallels?
Lil Nas X is the real Boy Who Cried Wolf.
Because it's kind of like The Boy Who Cried Wolf, but instead it's the guy who will do absolutely anything for attention.
Even beyond that though, the laziness in interpreting media, the profoundly incorrect statements that seem harder to fuck up, and the quotes from the people who probably shouldn't be anywhere near the music industry in the first place speak to both a lack of interest in the topic and a commitment of making the most clickbaity conclusions, rather than the most reasonable ones. Sometimes the truth really isn't that exciting, but you can still turn it into an interesting story if you do the research. Something that I fear is simply too hard for some of these people. Although 2025 was a bad year for Lil Nas X, plenty of people have had worse years, but still come back to enormous success. He may not ever have another Montero level hit, he may never release music again for all we know, but he'll be fine as long as he knows he can find his way back to that normal. And that's one thing he definitely deserves to know amongst a slew of voices proclaiming him finished. He deserves to know that there is always a way back.
Even though he disrespected and mocked my God, I still offer him my prayers.
For the creators, 2025 was a time where they could herald the demise of any creative they wanted without too many questions being asked of them. However, like for Montero Lamar Hill, it's a new year now. I'll see you losers when I have something else to say. Hello everyone, if you can hang on to me for just a minute longer, I wanted to end this video with a thank you. I appreciate every single bit of support I got on the last video, especially those of you that stopped to offer some kind words and constructive feedback. I'm not even really sure how I could follow up a video that got that kind of response, but that was my best effort. I'll probably set up some additional social platforms and stuff like that in the future. If you're interested in what I've got by the time you're watching, I'll leave some links in the description. But yeah, in the meantime, I hope you enjoyed this one, and there will be more soon. Thank you.